Now, you've been doing executive recruitment for the past 15 years, so you've worked with some amazing leaders. Can you share some tips, some advice for those individuals who are looking for an executive position?
So I think the most important trait right now is a systems orientation, partnership building, and collaboration. That is really the way that Ontario's healthcare system is going. So that would be the number one trait that I think organizations are looking for. You can never underscore the importance of communication skills, so important at an executive level. The ability to articulate a vision and inspire teams to follow you in that vision. And then, of course, healthcare, so important is government relations and advocacy and having that political acumen, the ability to build relationships with funders and influence government decision-making. But I think, to be honest, the most important trait right now is an emphasis on the softer skills. So having strong emotional intelligence and a focus on relationship building. And I think that is going to be key as healthcare organizations turn their attention to pandemic recovery.
I totally agree with you. It's always called those soft skills. It hasn't received as much attention, but now everyone realizes how important it is. And how do you assess for that when you are recruiting? Because sometimes they don't come across in an interview. How do you make sure you're finding the right candidate?
Great question. So I think what's great about the executive search process is that you are building deep relationships with candidates. You have multiple touch points throughout the recruitment process. So initial telephone screens, multiple interviews. So you're looking for those softer skills to come out through those interactions. Another important piece of the puzzle is also, psychometric assessments, where the client can really share with you what's important, what is their culture, what does fit look like for their organization. And you can use psychometric assessments to look at the values and the motivators for candidates. So I think that's another way that you can really assess the softer skills. Some organizations have tools that they use, and they already have profiles built out for their executive teams. So clients can choose to use their own specialized tools. We have had significant experience using Hogan, which is a tool that sort of assesses everyday behavior. So you have the bright side and those everyday behaviors, the dark side, so behaviors that might come through when candidates are under stress, and then the motives and values piece, which we're finding is really important these days.
If you had to think back to some of the best leaders that you've ever worked with, what are some of those traits or those qualities that they had or those behaviors that they demonstrated?
I think leadership is certainly situational, but overall, as I said, they're going to be excellent communicators, really be able to tell a story, take you on a journey, get you excited about their vision and have teams follow them. We talk about individuals that are going to support the development of others, or sort of that servant leadership mentality, that is important. But I think it's mainly that ability to be a strong communicator, create that vision, inspire teams, support others, lead from behind, give them the opportunities to learn and develop, give them the credit where credit is due, celebrate their successes. I think those are the things that make a great leader.
And when do organizations come to you, come to Myers Becker to do the search versus when would they do it internally?
So I think that clients come to us for a senior level executive search when they want a level of transparency around the process. I also think that when it's a difficult recruitment, or when it might be a highly unique skill set that they're looking for, CEO searches more often than not are going to executive search because it's so important to get the right person. It's a long, complicated process, and boards do not have, that's not their day job, and they need the specialists to support them on that journey. So I think the reason to go to search can be varied from organization role to role, but it's usually because it's a very unique skill. They're looking for broad reach, lots of transparency, and a thoroughness in the process. The CEO level searches do typically take a little bit longer. And the reason behind that is that there is usually, not always, but usually an engagement process. So you want to make sure that you're speaking to board members, to different partners within the system, speaking to government, speaking to the senior leadership team, but also engaging with staff to find out what are they looking for, what are the hot spots, where does the CEO need to focus. So that's what in a CEO search typically builds in more time in the process.
Right, and that's that high touch approach that you were describing earlier.
Yes.
So Hayley, what advice would you give leaders who are looking for executive level positions, given your background in recruitment in the healthcare industry, in the executive search world?
So I would actually encourage healthcare managers, directors, leaders to build relationships with executive recruiters that specialize in the healthcare space. As we know, quite often, healthcare organizations utilize executive search firms to find their leaders and new talent. So being proactive and building those relationships is a great way to have visibility. Share your resume. Let the recruiters know that you're open to learning about new opportunities and what areas you're particularly interested in. That way they can reach out when they have mandates that match your career goals. That's the first thing. Don't be shy about reaching out and establishing those relationships. I would also say that it's really important to cultivate your own network. So have those strong relationships that you can leverage and utilize as you're looking for growth opportunities. On the practical side, I would say invest time in building out a really robust LinkedIn profile. That's where recruitment's happening these days. So making sure that you are easy to find, the details are there. What are your portfolios? What have you been responsible for? What are your accomplishments? And make sure that you're highlighting those within your profile. I would say that when you're engaged in opportunities, the number one piece of advice that I can give candidates is to customize your materials. So do your research. Understand the organization and the journey that they're on. What are they looking for in this particular role and leader? So really customizing it, because clients want to see their organization reflected in your materials. So what's motivating you? What's drawing you to the organization, to the role? So why this role and why now? And make sure that that story is really included in your materials. And I think the last thing that I would say is, as you're preparing for interviews, you do want to be thinking about those accomplishments. What are the top 8 or 10 experiences that you've had in your career? Be able to tell the story. What was the challenge? How did you identify it? What was the plan you put in place? Who did you engage? And what was the outcome? So have those stories in your back pocket so that you can easily draw on them and tell the story about the impact that you've had as a leader.
Such great tips. Thank you so much for sharing. And in terms of those executive search firms, so Shiyen Becker is one, obviously. Do you have other recommendations for people to, access or to?
There's only a handful that really do specialize in executive search. And maybe what I would point people to as well is Longwoods. So Longwoods is a great resource where most healthcare organizations and executive recruiters are going to post their opportunities. So go there, be proactive, look at what they're immediately recruiting for, but also reach out every once in a while just to put that reminder in their inbox.